Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today as part of our Dion Leadership webinar series. I have our founder and CEO, Steve Dion, here with us to kick off our topic today that we're really excited to share with you all.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you everyone for taking time to join us for an hour for this edition of our Dion Leadership, a Gallagher Company webinar series. I'm excited to have a first opportunity to bring some of my new Gallagher colleagues to our Dion Leadership community, and we decided that the topic that felt like it was right for this moment in time, and it was hot off the presses, is some new data that we have on organizational well-being. So I am joined here today by two of my new Gallagher colleagues, and let me introduce our team. So I'll be monitoring this panel today, and I'm joined by Tamarah Saif. Tamarah is a National Managing Director of People Development and Insight, and the Dion Leadership team, the Leadership and OD team, reports into Tamarah's organization. And then we have Kathleen Schulz. Kathleen is the Divisional Vice President and Global Innovation Leader of Organizational Wellbeing. And out of all the 70,000 people we have at Gallagher that I could have asked to join our first webinar together, I handpicked these two. And I was excited about it because, well, Tamarah, one, is my leader, and Kathleen is out all over the place as a dynamite speaker talking about these subjects. And both of them are just passionate about the data that we collect from our clients and helping to turn that data into action. And one of the things that Dion Leadership didn't have, and part of, one of the many reasons why we wanted to join forces with an organization that's as rich and global as and resource rich as Gallagher, is that we didn't collect a lot of proprietary, firsthand data to report out. We might talk about a study somebody else did, but now we have our own team that collects wonderful data that I think can inform our clients. So our hope today is to give you some great insights and tools as you think about 2026 and being able to turn your data into action. So thank you, Tamarah and Kathleen, for spending some time with us this morning. Before we get into the presentation, I just kind of wanted to level set our approach to today. I'm going to just take 2 or 3 minutes for those of you that have not met what the Dion Leadership, a Gallagher Company business is explain that and sort of our position on this topic. And then we're going to spend about 15 minutes or so having Kathleen and Tamarah unpack some current, rich, insightful data in regards to the well-being and culture and a few different spaces, and you'll see that data. Then we're going to take the slides off, and we have a series of questions that I'm going to ask them and have a discussion about how we can take that data and making it meaningful and hopefully helping you guys use that information to turn it into action into your organizations. I'll also be monitoring the chat as well, so please, please, please add a question. We'd love to use your questions as opposed to ours and making sure that you get what you need today. So just as an intro here, where sort of Dion has sat, and my personal passion over the last 18 years is believing that organizations are better when employees can start every day excited and end every day accomplished. And if you wanted to use a word around that, there's well-being. Like having well-being is an important element for those conditions to happen. For somebody to want to walk in every day into their job going, I'm excited to do what I do with the people I do with, and then leaving every day with this notion of, I accomplished something. I feel good about myself. I put some points on the board, and I have time and energy and effort to have, the second part of my life. And part of what we do every day is to help create those conditions in organizations. And how we do that is through a series of kind of main solution areas. Leadership coaching is helping senior leaders, do the work that they need to do to drive that throughout the organization. We run many management leadership development programs to help build the skills and competence. And we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the data findings in management development and where other organizations are seeing that. We also know that a lot of this work happens in teams. So we help teams become better and perform better through team development programs. And then today's work is really kind of in this organizational development and assessment space. So helping organizations think about tools, programs, resources that will create those conditions to create organizations where employees can start every day excited and end every day accomplished. These are some of the clients that on the Dion leadership side that inform this work. As you'll see the data that we have today, Gallagher has, I don't even know how many, you guys can tell us too, many thousands of clients. And the data that we're going to share is through the lens of asking many of our clients about where they're at within these areas and topics. So I just wanted to kind of level set that, why we picked this topic, and now turn it over to my colleagues to sort of drive some insights for each of you. Please take some notes and give your, if you have any questions about the data, we're going to go through this data set, like I said, for about 15 minutes, and then kind of systematically unpack the information that we have there. Turn it over to my team.
All right, well, I'm going to get us started, and let me just say, Steve, I feel so honored to be an initial guest on your show here. And anytime I get to do something with Tamarah is always an honor as well, and fun. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. And I think out of the gate, I'm going to kind of run us through just setting like some foundational information around organizational well-being. And I don't think that there is any one exact right way to define organizational well-being, but we're pretty intentional about how we think about it at Gallagher. And what we know about well-being, and you kind of mentioned this, is you can't get to organizational well-being unless you have employees who are well, well physically, well emotionally, well financially, and well at work. So our commitment to our clients is we're going to help you face your future with confidence through our proactive people strategies. Our job is getting our clients to positive outcomes for their business, for their people, and really importantly, for their customers and their communities. So for us to be able to do a good job and help our clients achieve positive outcomes, we have to understand anything that might get in the way, anything that could be a threat to getting to those positive outcomes. And it means we need to back the conversation way, way up and deeply understand the organization's culture, everything about their culture, their leadership behaviors, their compensation philosophy, their benefits philosophy, their policies, the degree of trust in their organization. Are they measuring it? We're going to talk a lot about that today. Their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how appreciated and recognized do their employees feel? What's their communication strategy? What's the tone of their communication? How are they leveraging technology to really help their employees stay connected, but to also help them make good choices around their benefits? So it's the culture within the organization that is going to significantly influence how we show up every day at work, right? Our behavior at work, how we take care of our own health, how we treat our colleagues and our customers, how we use and value our benefits. So culture drives employee behavior drives organizational risk drives outcomes. It's all connected. So I think you'll hear both Tamarah and I kind of talking about this holistic, it's all connected throughout our session today. And it all begins with data. We collect, as you mentioned, Steve, a lot of data at Gallagher. We are a data first, data drives decisions at Gallagher. But it can't just be data for data's sake, right? The data has to lead to strategic advice, actions that are right for your business, your people, your industry, your segment, your geography, all of it. And when we do a good job at that, we build trust. And that's our goal. Our goal is to become a trusted member of our clients' teams. So that's kind of setting the concept and kind of setting the foundation for our conversation today. Now let's dig into some data. There we go. So again, we have multiple mechanisms for collecting data at Gallagher. I work a lot and responsible for the development and the deployment along with Tamarah's team on our quarterly organizational well-being polls. And what's cool about these polls, I think, is things are moving so fast these days. Like you got to be collecting data pretty frequently. So they're quarterly in nature and they all have themes, right? And the theme is reflective of whatever's kind of happening in the world. So whatever we're hearing are the pain points from our clients and employers out in the field is what drives the themes for our polls. So our first poll of 2025 was on family forming and reproductive benefits. We were getting a lot of questions around that from the field. Our second one was on the dynamic between stress, leadership, and culture. And then our third one, which is hot off the presses here, the theme was what now? The employer response to the changing economic and labor conditions that we're in right now. So here's what we learned. How have recent economic changes impacted your business? And you can see there, 54% are saying yes. Over half of businesses have been impacted, and they've been impacted in a negative way. What are they most concerned about? Retention. Like, so even though attrition is slowing down a little bit, holding on to the good employees that we already have is still a bigger pain point than even the ability to attract new talent. A lot of concern around increasing cost and potential losses of revenue around potential tariffs, generational culture dynamics. The volatility hits different generations differently, and then a lot to navigate with different types of state law leave navigation. We asked, has the current economic and labor conditions, have they impacted your organization's culture? And I think it's kind of like of course it has, right? So almost half of organizations have said, yeah, our culture has been impacted in not a great way. How? Of those 45% of organizations, 70% are saying it's higher levels of stress and burnout. 51%, it's reduced employee engagement. We're going to dig into that. Increased workload due to staff shortages, decreased job security or fear of layoffs. And it's interesting, we collect this data by different industries. And I would say these top five are the top five for most of the industries that we collect data on, but the order changes. That fear of job insecurity or fear of layoffs is actually a little bit higher with larger employers than it is with smaller employers. So it's interesting to dig into the data. And then finally, again, difficulty attracting and retaining talent. Next slide.
I also want to pause on this slide real quick. I know there's a lot of data in this slide. Let the participants know, because we always get this question. We will be sending out the recording from today's webinar. We post it on our YouTube channel. So if you want a data snip of this, you'll have that there. We'll send that out to you tomorrow as well. We also will give you an opportunity, we'll show you at the end how you can participate in these quarterly studies and receive the data back as a participant in that study each quarter. So I'm really excited that we get to bring these offerings to you guys now.
So what are we doing about all of these issues that are happening in the market right now? So these are the 2025 top strategic priorities for attracting, retaining, and engaging talent. This is what we learned. Number one is improving employee communication. Tied for number one is improving employee communication and enhancing manager effectiveness. And the little numbers that you see below there are where they were last year. So improving employee communication, a really significant uptick from 2024 to 2025 in terms of being a strategic priority. Manager effectiveness, which I think we're all happy to see, moving from number 2 last year to number 1. Rounding out the top 5. Number 2, improving employee appreciation and recognition. It was number 1 last year, but still really important and on the radar for employers. Compensation analysis holding at number 3. Preparing future leaders, up 1 from 2024 to 2025, and we are seeing more organizations participating in succession planning, which I think we all think is a good thing, knowing the demographics and what's ahead of us. And then number 5, this was the surprise for me in a good way. Sometimes the data uncovers not so great surprises, but this was a good one, right? Revamping training and development was number 9 last year, like really not even on the radar, up to number 5. And I would say that I think we're all happy to see that, because all these other objectives here, we're not going to be able to achieve them unless we have some training and development to be able to help us actually, execute on these strategic priorities. And the poll that we just finished, this data isn't in this data set, but if you request the whole poll results, you'll get it. One of the areas that we asked in the poll was, what are you doing, from an organization to try to, manage cost and be more agile? And I was really happy to see that we didn't see many employers cutting training and development. They're cutting in other areas, but they don't seem to be cutting in training and development. I think that's good news.
And I know in preparing for this, I went back to our team, who went back to a lot of our clients to kind of give some real life examples to how this is playing out. And when we get through the data, I know we're going to unpack this a little bit further, but I definitely see this within the organizations we work in as well. So it kind of explains a little bit of sort of requests we've had all year, and now I can see it sort of coming together in this data set. It's really interesting.
Right. So, let's dig into employee engagement, trust, well-being. When we talk about all these things, it's kind of back to that. It's all connected. All of these things are reciprocal and they are influencing each other. And when we talked about communication and manager effectiveness, they're all having an impact on employee engagement. And why do we really need to be concerned about and care about that? For the, I think, fourth year in a row, employee engagement is the most important people metric for determining future business success, followed by the turnover rate and trust in leadership. When we look at leader competencies, this data has been pretty stable as well. We're building in these dramatic pauses around the data. So we've been, tracking this data over the past few years, and it's been pretty stable. Most significant leadership competency required for success: communicating effectively, number one; the ability to build trust as a leader is number two; and strategic thinking. I think it's going to be interesting. Strategic thinking last year was number 9. It's up to number 3 this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if it continued on the upward trend there, based on kind of the volatility that we're seeing kind of in the market right now. So this is the organizational perspective. When people are filling out our polls, they're answering these questions on behalf of their organization, right? But we also asked a question: what is most important to you? So this isn't you filling out on behalf of your organization. This is you filling it out on you. What's the most important or desirable quality that you are looking for in your direct manager? And trustworthiness by far was number 1, followed by being an effective communicator and being consistent. And they're all connected, right? So the person who is a really good communicator is probably better positioned to build trust and be considered trustworthy. But for me, this data on here shines the very bright light on trust as an increasingly important, I would actually say critical, business and health metric.
I love this slide. And I think for those of you that are listening in, this is the kind of slide that you can take in to your C-suite to talk about how do you create a better business, and taking topics like trust and making them less squishy and more of an action plan item to get to business results. Because there's definitely a walk between how somebody behaves individually to what's happening in the organization that create organizational outcomes of people wanting to stay and give discretionary effort. So it's all in here. I think it's really exciting to kind of see it all together.
And then when we think about trust, trust again is going to significantly influence employee engagement, the level of employee engagement, which we just said is the number 1 people metric for determining future business success. So at Gallagher, we have our national strategy and benchmarking survey. It's a massive survey. There are over 4,000 responders. So the data set is incredible. And it's not a question, it's a statement. There's a statement in the survey, and it says, our workforce is highly engaged. And there's an agreement scale with that. So 61% of responders in our 2025 National Strategy and Benchmarking Survey agreed or strongly agreed with the statement, our workforce is highly engaged. I think, that to me seems very, very high. So the next question becomes, well, how many are actually measuring it? So let's look at that stat. 58% are measuring it, and they've measured it in the past 2 years. So then the final question: every year we measure this, and every year I go to Tamarah's team, the researchers on Tamarah's team, to check our employee engagement data repository and say, what is it actually? So if we think it's 61%, what is it actually? And here's what we learned: 33%. So there's a really big disconnect between what we think and what we know. And for me, this just makes me really concerned that there's a lot of employers that really don't have their finger on the pulse of what's really going on with their employees. And even if you're part of the 58% that have measured in the last 2 years, if you are action planning off data that is 2 years old, considering how fast employee expectations are moving right now, you may not even be working on the right stuff. So this is where we really need to kind of bring these things together. And then the question becomes, well, how? So that's where I'll turn back to you, Steve and Tamarah, to really talk about how do we get there? How do we build that trust? How do we do it?
You want to take us there, Tam?
Yes, absolutely. So how do we build the trust? How do we get there? Is that the question, Kathleen?
That's the question.
All right, that's the question. So let me thank you, by the way, for having me here. This is so exciting to be in this webinar with two of my absolute favorite people. So thanks for that. So trust. Trust is foundational. So you all have heard Kathleen talk about how important trust is, that employees trust their leaders, they trust their organization, they feel psychologically safe. And this reduces stress, it reduces anxiety. And we know that high trust organizations see much better teamwork. They're more open to communication. There's higher resilience there during a change. And so employees are more likely to seek help. They use well-being resources, and they're also staying committed to organizations. So in terms of building trust, especially in a skeptical environment, we are in a time of constant change, of perpetual disruption. Building trust is paramount. So being transparent, that's really the first key, the first step. Sharing information openly, even when the news is tough. I mean, I've certainly been in that position. I know you all have been in that position out there in the audience, Steve and Kathleen, where you have to give information, give news that isn't really warm and fuzzy. It's not great news, but employees, what we found is that they truly value honesty over anything else. And then there's follow through. So the second thing, and I have a couple of steps here. The second thing is follow through, and that's you're going to do what you say. Consistency between your words and your actions, that's really the fastest way to build credibility and to build the trust that's needed. The other piece of advice that I would provide would be prioritize well-being. So make visible investments in your employee health and well-being, and not just programs, because that could seem very performative, but have a genuine care in daily interactions with your employees. All of those items, all of those actions are going to help build trust in the organization.
Thanks, Tamarah, and thanks, Kathleen, as well. I know, like, we're Dion Leadership has lived is really in this building proactive people strategies, the orange category here. So many times we're being asked to come in to help an organization who says, we think our middle manager leaders aren't engaged, or we're trying to build a pipeline of talent to the senior level, or, our plant supervisors are not, performing the way we think they should. What I like about this slide is it helps show what we should be doing before we get to that to inform the right people strategy. And then afterwards, it's all these other items that we need to do to create them to be sustainable, ongoing, and how to live that. And I really appreciate what we heard earlier today too, about strategic communications becoming a really big priority, because trust comes out of communication. And so, I think there's a lot of pieces in accountability, and as we see in terms of living it, the training and development programs, but putting in sort of employee value propositions, that all those things don't reside in a vacuum. But as Kathleen mentioned at the beginning, all of this stuff is interconnected. So we've really shared with you so far information about where organizations were at in this last quarter's data. And then the other big insight, which maybe it's a big insight for some of you, maybe it's not, is the difference between leadership thinking organizations are engaged and employees telling you that they are not engaged. And that's the gap there. So let me take the slides off. This gives you some prompt for some questions. I'll start monitoring the chat now, but let's just have a conversation about this with each of you, and what do we do with some of this information? So first, Tamarah, let me ask you a quick question. So, we do see that organizations have tight budgets right now. There's a lot of issues with tariffs and with, instability still. So, they need to make the right choices in investing in areas that's right for their business and right for their people. So what types of listening strategies do you think that employers can consider as approach to, be cost effective in this, but also know that they're choosing the right things to work on?
Like you said, tough business environment, and every investment has to be justified. So at this point, it's a business imperative to listen. And it's really not a nice to have. You have to do it. And we've seen that the most effective organizations use a blend of employee listening, which could include engagement surveys. It could be onboarding surveys, stay interviews, pulse checks. You certainly don't have to do it all. We don't actually recommend you do it all, but they also employ customer listening. So they are gathering NPS scores. They are conducting customer satisfaction surveys as well. And so that dual approach really will help an organization and their leaders see a much more robust and full picture of how the employee experience, their engagement, how that connects to customer outcomes, and most importantly, business performance. Your business is not performing, you will have no customers, you will have no employees. And the real power that we see comes from correlating those data sets. So for example, we've helped clients in the past discover, their units, their stores, their functions, those that have low engagement. If we look at NPS scores, we've found that they often have lower NPS scores as well. And so then organizations really can be targeted in their action to drive retention and customer loyalty. I think one of the keys here would be don't overcomplicate your listening strategy. Like I said, you don't have to do it all. And from a Gallagher perspective, we use predictive modeling to ensure that our survey items truly measure what matters. And you have to know what matters, right? Is it engagement, satisfaction, customer satisfaction, your business outcomes? So we advise our clients to focus on that data that will inform their next step, not just collect data for data's sake. So again, your listening strategy can be simple, and your goal is to listen with intention, act on what you learn, and then continually refine your approach so that your investments are always aligned with what matters most to both your people and your business.
Yeah, and love to hear from participants as well. If you have any particular insights about your data listening tools that you want to share and how you have used that to inform changes in what you would have done, I'd love to hear that as well. I know I can chime in on that as well. We've had a fair amount of opportunities this year for clients to ask us to engage in listening tools or programs, some of which were organizations that said, we just bought this other company. We don't know much about each other yet. Like, let's look at the data and help inform how we're similar or different in terms of culture and satisfaction and engagement. And it created some great insights for them to manage that integration in a very different way than they otherwise would have. Another organization said, our senior team believes in listening, and understanding. And it wasn't so much in the results of the aggregated total data. It was when they broke data up by level, by location, by tenure, that they could make meaningful insights and find out that maybe this one location that's far flung is not as healthy as we thought it was, because the leader comes into corporate and paints this rosy picture, but what's going on underneath the covers isn't where it should be. So it helped the organization and the HR team decide where they should focus their leadership development dollars and not kind of peanut butter everything, but to be a little more surgical on where they should spend their time. Kathleen, you mentioned trust is a critical business and health metric. How does trust impact health and well-being particularly?
Yeah, so it was interesting. We did a poll last year, and it was the one where we were looking at the impact of stress, leadership, and culture. And one of the questions we asked was, what are the top 3 words that you would use to describe the culture within your organization right now? And I was pleasantly surprised to see the number 1 word was collaborative. I think in general, collaborative is a very positive word, except when it's not, because there's a dark side to collaboration. And I think sometimes we take collaboration, we know if a little bit of this is a good thing, then a lot must be a lot better. So we kind of engineer collaboration into the work, which can be positive, but then all of a sudden, you're on 6 work groups and you're leading 4 of them. And, we've taken you and we've stretched you too thin. And the impact maybe doesn't necessarily match the intent, and we're pushing you right down that road towards stress and burnout. And just kind of thinking to the data that we just looked at, almost half of organizations see their culture is been negatively impacted by the volatility we're seeing right now, and the most important way that it's being impacted by increases in stress and burnout. So when we think about how stress is wreaking havoc, like not just on how we show up to work every day, our productivity and our performance, but on our health. I mean, stress is really foundational to either contributing to the development or the worsening of pretty much every medical condition, right? If we're talking about cardiovascular, digestive, behavioral health, time away, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So what we know about high trust organizations is that in high trust organizations, employees are 74% less stressed. That is not insignificant, right? And for me, this is where issues around culture building, leadership development, building trust become benefits tactics, right? So when we're screaming towards the end of the year right now, we're in open enrollment season. It's crazy. Everybody's trying to finish the year strong, but we're going to turn the page. And then in Q1, most of our organizations are strategizing. Most of our strategy meetings occur in Q1. And we need to be talking about leadership development and culture, measuring it, culture building activities in those benefit strategy meetings, because better leaders equal better results. We haven't historically really thought about it that way, but I'm hoping for a change in the paradigm there, because if we could put in great resources, but if people don't use them because they don't trust the data, they don't trust the organization, they're not going to be valued as part of the overall employee experience.
And then, Tamarah, do you have any advice for leaders on how you build trust if the environment's already pretty skeptical?
Absolutely. So I touched on it, a little bit of it a little bit earlier, but there's always more in building trust. There's always more that you can do. And listening, one, which I talked about listening strategies just a little bit ago, and acting. So you do want to invite feedback. You absolutely want to acknowledge concerns. You can't ignore those concerns. I've been in organizations where that's happened. I've talked to clients where they're not inviting the feedback. They are not necessarily acknowledging the concerns. And then we start talking about the transparency, right, that's needed. So you need to acknowledge those concerns. You need to show how the employee and their input is helping leadership shape their decisions and being able to close the loop. And that really just demonstrates that you respect your employees. The other key point I would make here, which we talk a lot about, as you know, in all types of different leadership development programs and in coaching, is modeling vulnerability. So admit when you make a mistake, show that you're learning. There's always something for us to learn. It does not matter how long you've been in the business. It doesn't matter how long you've been in your job. It does not matter how long you've been a leader. You still have things that you can learn. And this really just humanizes you as a leader, and it also encourages others to do the same. So I implore all leaders out there to model vulnerability and be real about it. Don't be performative, mean it.
Hey, Steve, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
please
can I
do.
just jump onto that? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but, one of the things that we look really hard at, is, the degree of alignment between policies, practices, and behaviors, right? And so we measure it. And what we found, which is a little bit concerning, is, our communications practice at Gallagher spends a lot of time helping employers either develop or refresh their employee value proposition, or maybe develop their guiding principles or their organizational values, like a lot of that kind of work. And what we're finding is there's a bit of a disconnect, right, between what the organization says is their employee value proposition and what it's actually like to work in the organization, right? So if you're a new employee and you're coming in on a promise, right, because that's what the employee value proposition is, what are you going to get? What are you going to give? What's the deal? And you're in, you're excited, and 3 months in, you realize, wow, this isn't exactly what I thought I was signing up for.
Yeah.
So for me, like, it starts for me to understand some of the data we're seeing around disengagement and employees feeling conflicted and stressed, and kind of that understanding that all of these things are connecting. And if we're saying one thing and we're doing another, kind of to the point you were making about modeling, Tamara, like, we're in trouble. That is trouble with a capital T.
Yeah, we had a question just come in. How do you ensure trust when high-level decisions are being made, especially when leadership doesn't reach out to lower-level staff for input? And you were just kind of speaking to that a little bit. Who wants to take it first? I got some thoughts on that as well, but Tamarah, you want to?
I definitely have thoughts on that. My question is, why are you not speaking with your lower level employees? They have voices, their voices matter. This is why their voice matters, because they're the ones who are doing the day-to-day operational task, and they are most likely the ones that actually understand what's working and what's not working. So leaders they have to extend the listening to every level of the organization, because every voice does matter, especially in the sense of helping leaders understand what's really happening as you are, if you're a frontline manager or you're an employee on the manufacturing line. I've been in those facilities. I've worked side by side, employees on the line, and they would tell me, you know what, this process actually doesn't work, and this is why. There's a holdup there. And then I could take that impact back to my colleagues on the leadership team and say, hey, what we thought works actually doesn't really work, and this is why. So my advice is the employee listening strategies have to be at every level. And there's a way to do it. Again, you don't have to go incredibly deep and use 5 different tools, but you can use tools to simplify getting input from all levels of employees.
I would also say too, like, no client that I think any of us work with has money to waste, right? So the only way you're really going to know if your people strategy is going to be relevant for your business and your people is to pull them in and make sure that where you're investing your money is going to be relevant to your people. And they'll value that more if they feel heard.
Yeah, for us, one of the most powerful leadership models I think we teach at the mid and senior level is this model we call work of leaders. And it's this idea that leadership is a process of visioning, aligning, and executing. And where many organizations, I think, make a misstep is senior leadership visions. They make a decision and then they execute, and they just forget about the alignment process. And the alignment work are behaviors around having two-way dialogue, having structured communication programs. It's all the listening. It's all those things that I think we were just talking about, but to teach leaders that they do need to collect information at the right sources and have some vulnerability, as you mentioned earlier, Tamarah, to maybe go to an organizational level and say, we're exploring this thing. You know, I don't know enough about what you do or how you do what you do. Give me info so I can take that back to senior leadership to make a decision. Organizations practically aren't going to have everybody weigh in to make high level corporate decisions, of course. But there is a point in which we have to say, do we know what we need to know? And there's a process around visioning that includes, did you challenge assumptions? Did you collect good information when you vision? So I guess one of the other answers I'd have from a practical perspective is to teach this visual alignment execution model to your organization. Great question, thank you. We talked, I'm going to turn to another subject that I think is important too, that historically we've talked about attraction and retention kind of as two sides of the same coin, or in the same sentence. But a lot of this data here showed that there's some different drivers between attraction and retention. Tamarah, I'd love to kind of have you unpack a little bit about what the differences are there and how folks that are listening in might think of them in different ways.
Absolutely. So we have learned through many years of research that yes, attraction and retention, they're critical, but they are driven by different factors. And so I'll unpack that a bit. In terms of attraction drivers, so what actually gets someone to even look at an organization or consider joining an organization today? Candidates are drawn to organizations that offer purpose, growth, and flexibility. They also want to see clear career pathways. They want opportunities for development, and they also want a culture that aligns with their values. So if we're looking at these organizations, they're looking at employer brand, they're looking at reputation, and they're also looking at some visible level of commitment to I&D. And these things are increasingly important to candidates. And then we have retention, the other side of the coin. So once someone is there, once an employee is in the organization, you open the door to them. What keeps them there is more feeling appreciated, having confidence in their ability to succeed, and then seeing the organization adapt to their needs. So we just talked about the listening, right? And how we need to listen to all levels within the organization. Employees are looking to see, how are you adapting to today's environment so that you can help me help you in this organization? We're in a time of change. So recognition, they want that. We talked already, trust in leadership. And they really are looking for meaningful development opportunities. So while they're looking at the organization as an attraction piece, they want to see that an organization values self-improvement and development. Once they're there, they want to actually experience it. And, we've seen, organizations really should tailor their strategies to fit attraction and to fit retention. It cannot be one and the same, to bring the right tactics to both of them, so that you can bring those folks in, you can keep them engaged, you can keep them committed. And I think the, kind of a key thing here to take away is that clearly one size does not fit all anymore. So think about that as you're developing strategies and tactics around attracting your folks into the organization and how you're keeping them engaged.
Yeah, I know I can point to a lot of the organizations we've been working with the last couple of years have asked more for a professional development, leadership development series that they didn't do before. I mean, that we used to see more management and above programs that clients would ask us to be involved with. And now they're saying, we want these, and we have these knowledge in 90 classes, like 90-minute virtual workshops. It's structure led with various, very sort of micro topics. And more organizations are saying, we have to get our professional level staff, not managers, but a help desk analyst, an accountant, people that may not have had leadership or professional development classes. They might have had classes in the technical part of their job, that it's now expected, even at those first levels in their career, to be able to get classes on, how do I have difficult conversations? How do I, deal with a peer? How do I have better time management? And it's just becoming part of what organizations are budgeting for, that I didn't see that 4 or 5 years ago. I think that kind of speaks a little bit to what you're saying in terms of the data of people wanting to have active career development opportunities. Okay, let's move on to another subject. We have about 15 minutes left. Let's talk about culture. Kathleen, when we went through Gallagher's approach to organizational well-being, you talked about the importance of culture getting positive outcomes for business outcomes, I guess. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit more? Culture is quite a big concept.
Yeah. But first, my brain is going to kind of just something that you just said. The data that we looked at earlier, the top strategic priority for 2025, enhancing communication, enhancing manager effectiveness. But we also asked in that same poll, what are you doing? So, the top initiatives that organizations are focused on in order to actually enhance manager effectiveness speak to the points you were both just making. Number one was helping managers be able to deliver more meaningful feedback, helping them be better communicators, and helping them lean in instead of lean away from difficult conversations. So we know, workplace conflict is on the rise. I don't think any of us expect that to change anytime soon. So, when managers are better able to deliver meaningful feedback, it kind of speaks to what you were talking about, Tam, like higher levels of appreciation. It reduces our stress. It makes us feel more valued, recognizes our contributions. So I think those are all really positive things. And that kind of fits squarely in that culture bucket. Our goal, again, is to try to get our clients to positive outcomes for their business, their people, their customers, their communities, and really think about what might get in the way of that. And if we really don't dig into culture, how we do the things we do, the alignment or maybe lack of alignment between our policies, our practices, and our behaviors, if we really don't understand that, it's going to diminish our ability to get to those positive outcomes. And I just don't think we can afford that right now. So that's, it kind of comes back to this understanding how all of the pieces of the business are connected. We can't really be thinking in silos about anything. We have to be thinking holistically about how, the hip bone connects to the, thigh bone.
And for me, I would say, from a culture perspective, culture starts really with a commitment at the organization of having a practice to cultivate culture, just like you have a practice to have a budget and fiscal responsibility, or you have a practice to create a safe workplace that doesn't have OSHA recordables. Like there should be a practice to understand and drive culture, because otherwise culture just happens. And in times that are difficult and organizations just respond to negative market conditions, all of a sudden people are being asked to do things that don't align with what they were told before. And you can erode a culture very fast.
And I think there has to be an accountability piece, right? And I think we just collected data on this where we asked if leaders were held accountable for their behaviors and actions. And I want to say it was less than 20% that could strongly agree that yes, managers and leaders are being held responsible for their behaviors and actions. So, I mean, it's one thing to have a plaque on the wall, that states the company's values. But if we're not living those values, it's just a plaque on the wall, and it actually can kind of, be harmful, to have a disconnect between this is what we say, but this is how we behave.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tamarah.
I'll just chime in really quickly. What I'm hearing and what I think as we're having this conversation is culture is incredibly intentional. You have to be intentional about culture, just like you're intentional about other components of your business, your strategy, how you're going to market. Your culture also has to be intentional.
For us, I would say too, when we are consistently teaching a leadership curriculum for managers, directors, VPs, it is signaling to everybody who's in those classes on what the behaviors we expect should be. And they go back out and they do those behaviors, and that can drive culture. So you can do culture from a organizational development, OD, listening, program system. Let's create a model and have words, top down kind of approach. That's important. But even the kind of middle or bottom up approach of this is what it means to be here, and doing that through a leadership program, we believe really it comes from sort of both angles, both teaching that consistently and not having a one and done. But, if we value, meaningful, trust-based, authentic, pointed communication where we're telling you what we believe to be where you're at as a person, and you have in dialogue, for example, if that's a meaning on the wall of a value, how do you teach all the things around that so people do that every single day, And when you don't do it, it gets shown. I mean, we just had we kicked off a leadership program, pretty comprehensive one just recently, that's going to be over the course of a year. An organization picked their best and brightest, put them in the first workshop and 3-day workshop. Our facilitator heard a whole host of things from the participants about how challenging it is to work there. And I think it was a surprise to the organization. It was a little mini listening session that they didn't expect. And in retrospect, I think they look back at this year and go, boy, we were reacting to things, not thinking about our workforce. And there's a lot of work to be done. Luckily, as a partner, we can go in and have conversations with the right senior leaders and say, this is where we're at, and ramp up the vulnerability, ramp up listening, make some changes, and I'm sure they can get back on track. But it was a really just good reminder of that might be happening. That was happening anyway. We luckily got them together to now know, and we can do something about it. Had that not happened, these best and brightest people would probably be leaving their organization sooner than later, right? I mean, they're frustrated, so got to manage that. The last subject I'd like to turn to, I think, before we close up in our last few minutes is we talked earlier, and Tamarah, I'll direct this to you. Training and development was specifically talking about enhancing manager effectiveness was one of the key points on the slides that we shared earlier. Can we talk a little bit about actions of what you can do to help increase manager effectiveness, if that is one of the priorities that organizations think are important?
Absolutely. I love this question because manager effectiveness really is a multiplier. What doesn't it affect in the organization? Burnout, stress levels, employee engagement, productivity. What doesn't it affect, right? So step one is really for organizations to define, well, what is an effective manager? What does it mean in our culture, in our organization? And then perhaps delivering customized training. So you literally just gave a perfect example of, going in and developing a leadership development program, this customized training that's tied to your business objectives and understanding what it means to be an effective manager. So we do a lot of trainings, right, as well. The mix of workshops, it could be small group coaching, it could be accountability partnerships that we help clients create. We actually just recently worked with a client. We're still working with them, going through a major culture shift. And we brought together their top leaders for a series of communication-focused workshops. So we had workshops in person, followed by coaching. We did some group coaching circles. We did some one-on-one coaching. And then the organization is implementing ongoing feedback. So it just doesn't stop with the training. There's also the kind of the in-person training and the coaching. There's also feedback. And what was key in this organization is that the CEO was highly involved. They were involved in this training and aligned with the organizational goals. And this is really what we feel has made the training stick so far, is that the CEO is behind it. They're backing it. And one thing that I do want to point out too is the best programs don't stop with just training managers for effectiveness. How do we actually know that managers are being effective? So we do need to measure the results of training, the results of, whether it's looking at engagement scores over time or pulse surveys over time. What are employees actually saying about their managers, about the effectiveness? Are our clients tracking skill application? We're helping them with that. We're looking at business outcomes for our clients as well. And that's how we know whether or not this is change, real change that's going to stick within the organization.
Thank you for that. And Kathleen, any other thoughts to manage effectiveness?
Good.
Yeah, I would say for me, the other thing I would add to this conversation is ensuring that the manager has time and space to actually manage. Like jobs are designed in a way that managers are coached to have white space in their day to actually talk to their employees, to work through issues. They're not, I mean, you can be a working lead if you've got maybe one direct report, but if you're a manager of 8 or 9 people and you've got this full workload of other things that you do, then you're really not managing. So there's a lot of abdication of management. So people aren't having conversations with anybody. And if you're working from home 5 days a week or even 2 days a week, I think it gets even more and more fractured. So setting an expectation of what it means to manage in your organization and ensuring that someone wants to do that. And if they don't, that there's maybe dual career paths that you can be a individual contributor expert, but don't just manage because that's the next thing to do, because not everybody wants to and has the personality traits to lead others. And there are assessments that, we use assessments all the time to help organizations help think through, is this going to be just too hard for the person? They have to come in every day and stretch the rubber band, as they like to say, to the point where it's going to break because they're being somebody they don't want to innately be. So others thrive in that environment. And it's like, if I can help impact other people and lead them and have authentic conversations and help direct work and coach people and give them feedback and watch them grow. I mean, some people are awesome at that, and for others, it's not their gift. So making sure that, people are in the right position and then developing those skills and tools and resources and always be reminders of those things, because as humans, there are things that we just sometimes don't want to do. So training also is a good reminder of the need to do some of those activities. Well, let's close up now. We only have a couple minutes left. We could talk all day. This is a great conversation. I hope folks that listened in have found some value for thinking about their plans for next year and where they want to spend their time and resources. And if you want to have any other conversations with us about any of these things, would be happy to do that. Let me just close up really quickly and share our last slide here is if you do want this data and you want to participate in future surveys, one is we're going to be collecting data each quarter. Kathleen mentioned to you what we've done the last 3 quarters. If you're connected to us on Dion Leadership, you'll be seeing those in our LinkedIn feed. You'll be seeing email communications. If you participate, you will automatically get the results. So I encourage you to do that. We want a larger data set and give you some real information. Also, from the data we have specific cuts. So in the middle here, you can see we have either, if you want to see the full industry report, or cut by specifically healthcare, manufacturing, business services, different industries, or small or large employers. If you'd like to email Lauren, who set this up, and we'll be emailing you tomorrow with a link for the replay. If you just want to email her back and say, I'd love to see the manufacturing cut of this data, we will collect that for you and give you the deeper, rich insights that are available there too. And just look out for more surveys and data. On the Dion Leadership side, we are just ready to publish our 2026 course catalog. You'll be seeing an email about that. Excited to share our new content. So if manager effectiveness is part of what you're looking to accomplish, we have some new courses in there. And we're just finishing up completing our annual leadership effectiveness coaching study. And we've measured for 5 years in a row the impact that coaching has. And that closes this Friday. We're going to take the month of December to write that up, and you'll be seeing the data in January. So if you do use leadership coaching and want to know its impact and its effectiveness, that'd be great. And for those of you that are clients that that you have a lot of coachees with us, we're going to be creating some subcuts for your organizations and being able to share back with you the results of your coaching programs compared to the total sample. So excited to bring a lot of data as we are going to bring this full circle to our community in addition to the application work that we do. And Kathleen and Tamarah, thank you so much for bringing your expertise to our Dion leadership community, and looking forward to kind of integrating the Dion business into this bigger Gallagher business and create a lot of value for organizations. And I'm glad this is another step rung up that ladder.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.